The first video in my On Privacy series looked at some advice written by Chinese General Sun Tzu around 500 BC. One of his most famous quotes begins, "If you know your enemy and yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." Today we are in the midst of a metaphoric battle between corporations engaged in surveillance capitalism and ordinary people for control of our personal data, and what U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis called, in a 1928 dissenting opinion, the right to be left alone. I'm Dr. John Padfield. I'm a business professor and a former Indiana state representative, and this is Business Reform, where we discuss issues at the intersection of business, technology, and society. My On Privacy series is intended to help you better understand the motivation and mindset of some of the key figures in this battle for the control of your personal information. I personally view some of these key figures as enemies of privacy and others as allies who want to help ordinary people reclaim and protect their private information. Today's video is about Eric Schmidt, who worked at Google from 2001, when the company was just 3 years old, until 2018. During his 17 years at Google, he served as the CEO for the first 10 years. Then in 2011, his role changed to chairman of the board. Because he led Google for 17 of the 26 years Google has existed, it is safe to say his personal views on privacy have helped to shape both Google's culture and Google's policies on how they collect, store, aggregate, and use customer data. So here are Eric's views on privacy in his own words. In a CNN.com article dated July 8, 2014, Eric was quoted as saying, quote, "We know where you are. We know where you've been. We can more or less know what you're thinking about." I happen to agree with Eric on that statement. Because Google is known to have tracked its users' physical location even after users had turned that setting off on their phones. What's that? You weren't aware that Google got caught doing that? In 2022, Google settled a $392 million privacy lawsuit brought by the attorneys general of 40 states for, as the New York Times reported, quote, misleading users into thinking they had turned off location tracking in their account settings, even as the company continued collecting that information. I am just glad a $392 million settlement taught Google a lesson so that they will never again violate users' trust and privacy. Oops, looks like I spoke too soon. Just 1 year after settling a $392 million privacy lawsuit, Google had to settle another, this time a $5 billion privacy lawsuit, for tracking users who were using incognito mode, which Google led people to believe was private browsing. Well, let's not go down that rabbit hole right now. Let's look at a few other things Eric Schmidt has said about privacy. Eric also said, "I actually think most people don't want Google to answer their questions. They want Google to tell them what they should be doing next." As always, links to all of my references can be found in the description of this video. So allow me to paraphrase what Eric just said. Eric thinks most people want Google to do their thinking for them. So maybe instead of confusing users by showing them both sides of a controversial issue, Google can just give a higher ranking to the search results that favor the correct side of a controversial issue. At least the correct side from Google's perspective. Also, Eric and others like him are very fond of saying,
if you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place.
Maybe he has a point. Let's just see what people might want to avoid doing to stay out of trouble. In January 2020, Zachary McCoy became a suspect in a burglary based on his location history that Google shared with the Gainesville Police Department. The 30-year-old happened to have ridden his bike through a neighborhood at the same time a home was being burglarized. Because Google's location tracking data put him near the house at the time it was being burglarized, he became a suspect. But don't worry, it all worked out just fine. It just cost him thousands of dollars to hire a lawyer and weeks of sleepless nights to get his name cleared, and after all, it really was his own fault. If he didn't want to become a suspect, he should have just stayed home instead of going for a bike ride. And after all, Zachary McCoy was only a suspect for a burglary. It's not like Google location data got him wrongfully arrested for murder. Well, it didn't get Zachary wrongfully arrested for murder, but it did get George Molina wrongfully arrested for murder and forced him to spend 6 days in jail. So if you don't want to be a suspect in a crime you didn't commit, maybe you shouldn't let Google track your location. Eric also said, your default mode should be to share everything. To this, I would sincerely like to ask Eric just one question. What's the password to your private email account? If there's something in your email you don't want me to read, maybe you shouldn't have written it. Also, according to Eric, I don't believe society understands what happens when everything is available, knowable, and recorded by everyone all the time. I wholeheartedly agree with him on that statement. And finally, Eric concludes, technology will move faster than governments, so don't legislate before you understand the consequences. Speaking as someone who has a PhD in technology, leadership, and innovation, I wholeheartedly agree technology will always outpace governments. I've said that before in other videos. However, speaking as a former Indiana state legislator, I could not disagree more about waiting to see the consequences. Surveillance capitalism is currently generating hundreds of billions of dollars per year among big tech companies that are household names, as well as sketchy data brokers you have never heard of. A percentage of that data and the money it generates is being funneled back into government and political campaigns in the form of paid lobbyists and campaign donations to keep their data harvesting practices legal. State legislatures and Congress need to act quickly to rein in these abuses of people's privacy before they become even more entrenched in our society. Who do you consider to be the friends and foes in the battle for control of your personal information? I would love to hear your comments in the comment section below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.